Haven Mart has defined my life for the past 17 years. My name is Julia Carter, and at 49, I've established myself as a pillar of the main store in Sacramento. When my children were in middle school, I began working as a cashier in the electronics section and worked my way up to senior operations manager. Over the years, I've led successful projects that range from restructuring our supply chain system to reducing operational costs by 20%. Despite my dedication and hard work, nothing could have prepared me for the unexpected text message that arrived on my phone one Thursday afternoon. "Need to see you in the conference room," Mark Livingston, the store's general manager, wrote. There was no greeting, no context. I felt a knot form in my stomach and a sense of anxiety flood over me. I'd seen many of these letters before, requests for updates, project assessments, and staff meetings, but this one felt unique. Something was off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I locked my office door, took a deep breath, and walked to the conference room. As I wandered through the aisles, I noticed the store's usual rhythm. Employees greeted customers, restocked inventory, and handled transactions. I strolled past Dan, our head of customer service, who smiled and gave me a quick thumbs up, obviously pleased with the recent improvement in customer satisfaction. We had recently implemented a new feedback system, which resulted in significantly higher service ratings. When I arrived at the meeting room, the door was closed, which was unusual considering the open-door environment we had cultivated at Haven Mart. Mark stood by the window, arms crossed and deep in concentration. Sarah from Human Resources sat next to him, her countenance blank and her posture rigid. A folder lay on the table between them, which grabbed my attention immediately. I sat at the table, my hands clasped in my lap, hoping to relieve my anxiety. Mark said, "Julia, thank you for coming," without looking at me. His voice sounded flat, almost mechanical. Mark, 38, had been with the company for 3 years, working as part of a plan to infuse new leadership in the store. His previous corporate retail experience had brought him to Sacramento, and his managerial approach was always professional, albeit a touch remote. He kept his focus locked on the window as he continued. "After reviewing the store's performance and your role here, we've decided to eliminate your position." I blinked, the words striking me like a shot to the gut. "What? What's my position?" I stammered, trying to absorb what he had said. But I had just completed my annual performance evaluation. It was excellent. My prior report received overwhelmingly excellent feedback. Mark gradually turned to face me with a frigid expression. "The verdict is final. Your pay is extravagant, and business requirements have changed. We're releasing you," he yelled, his voice slicing through the air. His remarks lacked empathy, and my years of service were not recognized. Sarah moved the packet towards me. "Julia, here is the exit paperwork. Your email access has already been canceled, and we will guide you through the remainder of the process." When I looked at the folder, I felt a deep aching in my chest. For nearly 20 years, I had poured my heart and soul into this location. I had sacrificed time with my family, postponed vacations, and worked on holidays to keep the store running smoothly. Yet here I was, rejected in less than 5 minutes. I was about to object and ask for an explanation, but something stopped me. I felt an odd sensation of calm. I couldn't explain why I wasn't angry, yet. I just smiled. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said firmly as I signed the leaving form. I got up and handed Sarah the form before turning to go. As I walked out of the room, I could feel Mark's gaze on me, relieved that I hadn't made an issue. I was dismissed, but I knew something that Mark didn't. The reality was, this was not the end of my journey. It was the beginning of something much grander. Carla Jameson, the VP of Regional Operations, emailed me 2 weeks ago. The headline said, "We'd like to discuss your future with Haven Mart." At the time, I assumed it was about my work on the inventory management system, which had been deployed in stores around the region. When I arrived at the San Francisco corporate offices, I was surprised to see not only Carla, but also Evan Mitchell, the Chief Operations Officer, waiting for me. "Julia," Carla said, her tone friendly but serious,
We've been watching your work for a long time now. Your efficiency improvements at the Sacramento facility have captured our curiosity." Evan agreed with a nod. "Particularly impressive is how you've managed to retain staff in a high-turnover environment." I never regarded my work to be particularly exceptional. I just did what I believed was right: respect people, identify inefficiencies, and implement effective solutions. "Thank you," I replied, unsure where the conversation was headed. "We're restructuring the leadership team in the region," Carla told me, "and we need someone who understands both the operational and human aspects of the business. Someone who can lead and grow our locations in the same way you transformed Store 137. We would like to offer you the position of Regional Director." Evan pushed a folder across the table, which I opened with eager eyes. The official job offer was. The compensation was nearly double what I was getting now. My palm trembled slightly as I read the terms. The position would entail managing 20 stores across Northern California, including Sacramento, and putting me in direct command of all regional leadership. This meant I would be in charge of Mark. I looked up to meet Carla's eyes, and she gave me a knowing look. She was well aware of Mark's reputation, which included his tendency to take credit for the work of others and his predisposition to terminate experienced personnel. "We've seen how he operates," Evan said softly, "and we've observed how you work. The difference is clear." I felt a sense of vindication sweep over me. For years I worked quietly in the background, producing results while others took credit. But now I had been recognized by those who truly cared. I smiled. "I'll take the job."
That evening, I traveled back to Sacramento with the offer letter carefully tucked into my backpack. The drive felt abnormally long, my mind spinning with possibilities and a quiet sensation of triumph. My years of hard work and dedication were finally paying off. The experience was both humbling and uplifting. My heart swelled as I imagined how I would be able to adopt improvements that would benefit every store in Northern California, not just the one I had grown so fond of. That night, I called my daughter Hannah to inform her of the news. "Mom, that's wonderful," she exclaimed, her enthusiasm contagious. "I've been saying it for years. You deserve this." "Thanks, sweetheart," I murmured, my voice breaking with passion. "I'm not sure if I believe it yet, but I'm prepared for this. It is time for a change." The next few days were a blur. I officially accepted the post the following Monday, seeking a 2-week transition period to complete ongoing projects at the Sacramento location. Carla agreed, underlining the need to keep the announcement discreet until the company-wide statement was sent out. The actual announcement will take place next Friday, and until then, I was to continue as usual. But it was difficult to behave as if everything was normal when I was going through such a significant upheaval in my life. I continued with my usual schedule for the next 2 weeks. I spoke with department leaders, handled inventory concerns, and ensured the store operated efficiently. Mark appeared to be watching me more attentively throughout this period, his demeanor becoming increasingly suspicious. Several times I saw him looking at printouts of my vendor communications or questioning other managers about specific financial approvals. "Be careful," Julia from the finance department told me during one of our lunch breaks. I overheard Mark speaking with Sarah in HR. "He's been seeking something, anything to turn against you." That wasn't surprising. Mark had been progressively removing senior staff members who had been at the store 137 times longer than he had. It was Thomas from the storehouse, after more than 20 years. Catherine, a member of the customer service team, resigned following the implementation of an extremely punitive performance improvement plan. I was the only one standing, the last vestige of the old guard, with a salary that was definitely an enticing target for Mark, who was attempting to portray himself as the store's bold new leader. What Mark didn't realize was that corporate had been watching him rather than me. Then on Wednesday before the announcement, I received an embossed envelope containing my official offer letter, benefits package, and a welcoming greeting from the executive team. The following Monday was my scheduled start date. The same day, I spotted Mark in a tight meeting with Sarah from HR, exiting grimly but resolute. Mark could sense the tension tightening around him. Carla informed me via a message on Thursday morning that the entire business would receive the news at noon. Expect some chatter, she warned, especially from 137. As expected, the responses poured in. Coworkers, astonished to learn of my elevation, sent me texts and emails. Jaime from electronics sent a note that read simply, "Justice." It was uncomfortable knowing that so many people were suddenly aware of my new position, but I had to maintain my professionalism. It was not about drama. The focus was solely on the work, and I was prepared to commence. Mark called me on Friday afternoon following the announcement. "Julia," he asked, his voice strained, "can we talk before Monday? I'd like to discuss the transition." I took a long breath before I responded. Part of me wanted to disregard the request, allowing him to fidget and stew in his bewilderment and fear. But that was not the kind of leader I intended to be. "Sure, Mark," I said, my voice cool and steady. "I have planned one-on-one meetings with each general manager next week. I've set aside Monday at 9 a.m. for our meeting. Please be ready to discuss the quarterly performance overview, staffing assessments, and loss prevention reports." Mark's silence on the other end of the phone line said volumes. I finished the call and put my phone away. This would be my first official test as regional director. Monday would mark the start of a new chapter for me and the conclusion of a terrible era for Store 137.
Monday morning, the chilly, foggy air of San Francisco Bay filtered in through the windows of my new corporate housing. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the burgundy blazer. For the first time in years, I was dressed professionally, making me feel like the leader I had always wanted to be. No more khakis and corporate polo shirts. My hair was fashioned nicely in a sleek bob rather than the practical ponytail I'd worn for years, and my makeup was understated but sophisticated. It was more than just the attire. It was about accepting my new job. I grabbed my phone and found texts from my daughter, Hannah, who was still humming with enthusiasm. "Show them who's boss today, Mom. I'm really proud of you." I smiled and replied, "Thanks, sweetheart. Yes, I will. I'll call you later with an update." I packed my briefcase, gathered the paperwork I had prepared over the weekend, and headed for Store 137. The journey took longer than intended owing to traffic, but I didn't mind. Anticipation kept me attentive and focused. When I arrived, I chose to park in the tourist section instead of my usual place. The regular area appeared to be a vestige of the past. Today was about creating a new beginning. As I approached the entryway, I spotted the workers inside. Some were peering through the windows, whispering to each other, or exchanging knowing glances. Others were staring, their expressions a mixture of wonder and expectation. My promotion had clearly gained traction, and I could feel the weight of their expectations. Stationed near the door, Jaime from the electronics department lit up when he saw me. "Wow, Miss Carter, you look wonderful," he exclaimed, a little astounded. "Thank you, Jaime. How is everything inside?" I inquired, attempting to keep my tone cool and professional. "It's tense," he said, his grin tinted with anxiety. "Derek has been stuck in the conference room for the past hour. Patricia has tried to calm him down. She's busy with donuts in the break room." Jaime laughed uneasily. I nodded, keeping my professional demeanor. I'll head there straight. As I walked through the store, I couldn't help but note how everything appeared from a different viewpoint. The aisles, displays, and staff appeared unchanged, yet somehow felt different. For the past 17 years, I was responsible for everything here. It was now just one of the 15 locations under my care. It felt liberating and weird. As I passed, employees stopped what they were doing. Some were nodding respectfully, while others gave little, knowing smiles or a discreet thumbs up. I nodded calmly, preserving the dignity demanded by my new position. It was not the moment for casual familiarity or nostalgia. It was now time to take on the role for which I had worked so hard. When I arrived at the conference room, I paused outside the door. Through the glass panel, I could see Derek seated at the table, nervously going through binders and spreadsheets. He checked his watch every second or so, evidently anticipating the moment when his life would be flipped upside down. I took a long breath, steadied myself, and knocked once before going in without waiting for an answer. "Good morning, Derek," I responded, my voice calm and forceful. Derek's face was devoid of color as he stood up abruptly. His eyes widened in surprise as he noticed my look. The familiar visage of his subordinate in a company polo shirt was no longer present. Instead, the woman standing in front of him was his new boss, dressed in a fitted suit that revealed our new power dynamic. Miss Carter, you look wonderful," he stammered, his voice weak. "Regional Director Carter," I gently corrected him, extending my hand. "Shall we begin?" He seemed motionless for a time, his gaze bouncing between the documents on the table and my face, as if he couldn't understand what was going on. But I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to do my job, and I wasn't going to allow personal feelings to cloud my judgment. Derek tried to take control of the meeting. He started with the presentation on store performance, going through slides that highlighted accomplishments, many of which I had personally pushed. "Under my leadership," he said, "Store 137 has implemented revolutionary tracking systems that have reduced shrinkage by 18%. I let him continue, knowing full well that he was avoiding any mention of my efforts. When he finished, I opened my portfolio, took a single sheet of paper, and placed it in front of him. "Thank you for that presentation," I responded evenly. "Now I'd like to discuss the termination of a senior operations manager with 17 years of experience, executed without corporate approval or proper documentation." Derek's confident facade crumbled. His eyes widened and I could see the color fade from his face. When he opened his mouth to speak, I stopped him. "I think we both know what happened," I said calmly. "Now we need to discuss your management style and the harm it's causing to this store." I pushed a report across the table, revealing a significant increase in staff turnover under Derek's leadership. "Restructuring," he murmured hesitantly, but I didn't buy it. "Restructuring doesn't lead to losing your most experienced employees right before the holiday season, and restructuring doesn't lead to a 15-point drop in customer satisfaction scores in 18 months. Derek squirmed uncomfortably in the seat. This was definitely not what he had anticipated. I wasn't here to play nice. I was here to restore the integrity of the store and, by implication, the entire region. I closed my portfolio, looked Derek in the eye, and said, "You have two options, Derek. You may resign effective immediately with regular severance. Alternatively, you can commit to a performance improvement plan under my direct supervision, complete with weekly reviews and specific progress goals." We both knew the irony. He had used the same ultimatum countless times to force out more experienced employees, but now the roles had reversed. Derek swallowed forcefully. "I'd like to investigate the improvement plan option," he said gently. "Good," I responded without emotion. "We have a lot of work to do."
The weeks that followed felt like a delicate balancing act, one in which I had to step cautiously, ensuring that the changes I enacted were measured, intentional, and helpful to both people and the company. I split my time between all 15 Northern California sites, but Shop 137 was my major priority. Mark's leadership had caused a significant gap in the store's culture, and it would take time to reestablish trust and morale. Derek struggled to adjust to the new leadership style I introduced during our weekly one-on-one meetings. I took the time to properly explain everything to him, breaking down what needed to be done to restore the store's past prosperity. Instead of using fear and authority to manage the workforce, I encouraged him to focus on empathy, transparency, and developing genuine relationships with them. "Your team doesn't trust you," I informed him one week after examining yet another complaint from an associate regarding his behavior. "Derek, building trust requires consistency, honesty, and genuine support, not fear." He'd nod, his gaze avoiding mine, but I could see his resistance. He was unaccustomed to a leadership style that prioritized people before profits. He had always depended on deception and intimidation, and changing his strategy was becoming tough. But I remained patient. I knew it would take time to reverse the harm Mark had caused, but I was confident in the adjustments we were making. Over several weeks, we rehired important team members, including Thomas from warehouse operations, who had been with the company for over 20 years, and Catherine from customer service, who was brought back as a trainer. These were the people with the knowledge and experience to rebuild the team and reestablish the culture that had once made Store 137 a success. We have developed anonymous feedback channels, which allowed staff to express their issues without fear of punishment. This action was critical in rebuilding trust, as many associates felt silenced under Derek's leadership. They desired to understand that Derek valued their opinions and did not view them as mere components of a system. The atmosphere slowly but steadily began to alter. Then, around 6 weeks into my term as regional director, Derek sought another confidential meeting. "Julia," he continued, sitting across from me, his shoulders slumping, "I'd like to tender my resignation." I accepted the envelope he had slid over the desk without opening it. My heart was filled with serene satisfaction rather than triumph. "I wish you success in your new role, Derek," I added, my tone calm and professional. "However, as I have previously stated, growth is not linear. I hope this experience informs your future leadership style." Derek didn't say much else. He nodded, rose up, and walked out of the office. I watched him leave, but I didn't experience the sense of accomplishment that I had expected. Instead, I felt the weight of the obligation I had taken on, which was even heavier now that Shop 137 was on the mend. After Derek left, I immediately began collaborating with the team to plan for his replacement. Jaime from electronics had proven to be a good leader, and I was sure that he could take on the post of interim general manager. His empathetic leadership style and commitment to the shop had earned him the respect of his peers, and he possessed the operational skills to guide the team through this shift. When I offered Jaime the opportunity, he hesitated. "Are you sure I'm ready?" he said, doubt creeping into his voice. "You've been ready for years, Jaime," I said. "You demonstrate by example. You listen before making decisions, and you prioritize people over profits while still achieving outcomes. That's precisely what Store 137 requires right now. You're the best guy for the job." Jaime agreed to take on the role, and I knew she was making the correct decision. Derek's leadership would remediate the hazardous environment. We were on our way to creating a stronger, more cohesive team. Over the next 6 months, I focused on the key parameters that were critical to each store's success. We witnessed an increase in employee morale, customer satisfaction, and operational efficiency. But the most satisfying transformation occurred at Shop 137. Jaime's interim leadership helped the store's culture heal. Our efforts were finally paying off as employee turnover decreased and customer satisfaction levels started to increase. Although the journey took a considerable amount of time, the outcome was overwhelmingly positive. The store was booming again, and positive improvements were spreading to the other locations under my supervision. This success was not just a personal victory. It was about fostering a culture in which people felt valued, respected, and supported. It was about creating a culture in which leadership was defined by service rather than power. Then, just when things started to feel stable, I received an unexpected message from Sarah in HR. "Julia," she wrote, "I just wanted to let you know that there has been a giant shift in the corporate culture. I've heard speculations concerning Derek's future within the organization. He's not making friends with the other regional managers." It wasn't surprising. Derek has always been a self-serving leader, more focused on promoting his own interests than genuinely supporting his team. Cracks in his facade seemed to be showing. People who had been afraid to speak up now were finding their voices and calling out long-accepted behavior. But I was no longer worried about Derek. I'd gotten over him. I was thinking about the future, about my new position and the job that lay ahead of me. There was still a lot of work to be done. But for the first time in a long time, I felt confident that Haven Mart was on track. I became comfortable in my capacity as regional director over time. The adjustments I introduced at Store 137 were gradually but steadily spreading to the 15 sites under my management. Employee morale had increased across the board, and key performance metrics such as customer happiness, shrinkage rates, and attrition were all heading upward. However, While those accomplishments were extremely fulfilling, it wasn't until a meeting a few months into my new post that I realized the significant impact of my leadership. Carla Jameson, the Vice President of Regional Operations, requested a meeting with me on Tuesday afternoon. Carla had been a supporter of mine since the beginning, but her tone on the phone this time was serious, almost urgent. "Julia, I need you to come to corporate for a meeting," she said in a stern voice. "It's about Derek." Derek. Even after all these years, his name remains significant. For a brief period, I felt a twinge of nostalgia for the days when he was my manager, and his decisions influenced my everyday existence. But this sentiment rapidly dissipated. I had moved on, and I was not going to let the shadow of his leadership follow me. The next morning, I arrived at corporate headquarters in San Francisco, still thinking about the work I'd left behind at the regional office. The headquarters felt chilly and distant in comparison to the friendliness I'd grown to associate with my store-level staff, but I wasn't there for the decor. I was waiting for the next episode in this unfolding story. Carla greeted me in the lobby, her expression more somber than normal. "We need to talk," she continued, ushering me into a small conference room. Inside, Evan Mitchell, Chief Operations Officer, was already waiting. "Julia, I'm glad you could make it," Evan remarked. His tone was measured, but not unpleasant. "We've been studying the regional performance reports, and I have to admit I'm impressed with the turnaround you've achieved at 137 and the other stores. However, we are dealing with a situation." I took a seat, my complete attention focused on the discourse. "What's going on?" Carla pushed a packet across the table to me, and I opened it to see an internal report on Derek. "We've been hearing disturbing reports from several of the other regional managers about Derek's behavior. He's been undermining your leadership, making attempts to discredit your successes, and spreading rumors about your position within the company." I could feel my blood pressure rising slightly, but I kept my voice calm. "What do you plan to do about it?" Carla exchanged glances with Evan. "We have decided to remove Derek from his job. He will not be part of this company's future. It is time for him to leave." I was amazed at how little emotion I felt. The vindication I had originally sought, imagining the day when I could eventually stand above him as a leader, wasn't as rewarding as I had hoped. It was no longer about Derek. The focus shifted to the adjustments I'd made and the remaining tasks that required attention. "Is there anything I need to do?" I asked. "No," Carla responded. "We have already created an official separation strategy. We wanted you to know about the decision, but we are handling everything internally." I nodded, experiencing an unusual combination of comfort and closure. As wonderful as it was to see the right thing done, I had no interest in prolonging Derek's collapse. The emphasis had always been on the job and not the drama. That afternoon, Carla and Evan informed me that Derek's departure would be officially announced to the rest of the firm. The announcement would be followed by the appointment of a new interim general manager for Shop 137, a role Jaime had previously filled with enormous success. Derek's departure would allow me to continue rebuilding the damage his leadership had caused. The next day, I returned to my office with an unexpected sense of success. There was no sense of victory, no rejoicing over the defeat of someone who had wronged me. Instead, I felt a peaceful satisfaction knowing that the changes I had initiated were irrevocable. Store 137 was no longer a hazardous environment. The employees, once considered disposable, were flourishing, and that's all that mattered. Over the coming months, I continued to collaborate closely with my teams throughout Northern California. I ensured that the values I instilled at Shop 137, transparency, empathy, and a commitment to operational excellence, were mirrored at other locations. The results were clear: increased employee retention, higher customer happiness, and a stronger sense of community within each store. But when I reflected on my experience, I realized it wasn't just about fixing a dysfunctional store or surviving toxic management. It was about establishing a new leadership norm that prioritized collaboration over control, empowerment over fear, and respect over authority. When I glanced at the store's performance records, noticed the cheerful smiles of staff who had previously feared for their jobs, and recognized that the company was on a new path, I realized something deeper. This was the win that counted, not the vengeance or the recognition, but the environment I had worked to create, one in which talent was cultivated, expertise was appreciated, and leadership meant service rather than power.